What if claiming a new identity was the only way to escape the trauma of the past? And why are some African Americans claiming to be indigenous Americans? And what does this have to do with some Igbos denying their roots? History is not just about dates and events. It's also about people. It's about how we carry the past and how it shapes us, and sometimes how we shape history too. Let's talk about a theory making waves in some circles, the FBA, or Foundational Black American Theory. Now, the idea here is that African Americans who descended from enslaved Africans in the United States are a distinct ethnic group. You see, FBA proponents, they argue that their ancestors' contribution through slavery, civil rights struggles, and culture make them foundational to what America is today. But here is where it gets more interesting. Some FBA proponents go a step further, claiming they are indigenous to America, suggesting that African Americans were native to Americans and were in America even before slavery and even before Columbus. For them, this is not just about history, it's about reclaiming identity, pride, and agency. This idea of redefining history and identity struck a chord with me because it reminded me of my own research on the Biafran War in Nigeria. My PhD thesis explored why some Igbo people, especially those at the heart of the Biafran self-determination movement that has just having some resurgence, are still pushing for an independent Biafra decades after the war ended. What I found was a story of trauma, a story of marginalization, and important to this conversation today, a story of identity. After Nigeria's civil war ended in 1970, many Igbo people faced harsh economic and political marginalization. Everybody knows that, right? But here's the twist. In some places, particularly in some areas of Delta and River States, some people began denying their Igbo identity altogether. They would say things like, I'm not Igbo, Rivers, or I'm Ikwere, or I'm not Niger, I'm not Delta, I'm Delta Igbo, I'm not Igbo. And why would some people even deny their roots? Now, it sounds strange at first, but it made sense once I dug deeper. The war and its aftermath carried a stigma for many Igbos. Identifying as an Igbo or a Biafra felt like carrying a burden of defeat. It felt like carrying a burden of loss. And in Nigeria today, it's still a burden of marginalization. And by rejecting that identity, some hoped to avoid the trauma and social stigma that is attached to the Igbo identity. Now, this process of distancing oneself from a painful history is what in my PhD thesis I called post-traumatic identity reconstruction. It's when an individual or a group redefines themselves to escape the trauma of its past. Now think about it. If slavery in the US and Biafra war in Nigeria both represented deep generational wounds, would it not make sense for some people to try to rewrite that history or change their identity or write their identity? For the FBAs in America, claiming indigeneity to America might feel like a way to reject the narrative of victimhood tied to slavery. And for the Igbos in Delta and River States, rejecting their identity might feel like a way to escape the scars of the Civil War and current marginalization. Here is the connection. FBA theory and the denial of Igbo identity in Nigeria are, to me, two sides of the same coin. They are about trauma. They are also about history, but more importantly, they are about survival in the world today. For FBAs, claiming indigeneity is a way to say we are not just descendants of slaves. We've always been here. We are the foundation of this country. And for the Igbos in Delta and rivers like the Kwere and the Niger Delta, the Delta Igbo, rejecting their Igbo-ness is a way to say we're not just defeated Biafrans, we are something different, we are something new. It's all about reclaiming dignity in the face of historical pain. It's about recreating and reclaiming their story. Now, here's the tricky part. While shaping identity can be empowering, it comes with risk too. For the FBAs in America, focusing too much on being indigenous could erase connections to Africa and the larger black diaspora. And of course, I know they don't care. And for Igbos in Delta and rivers, rejecting their roots might mean losing a vital part of their history and a vital part of their culture. And at the end of the day, it's about finding balance. It's about honoring the past without letting it define or confine you. You see, identity is fluid, and I learned this on my research in Igbos in post-war Nigeria. Identity is shaped by trauma, it's shaped by history, and it's also shaped by the need to belong. But whether you are African American claiming indigeneity or an Igbo person denying your heritage, the goal is the same. It's about finding pride, dignity, and a sense of self. What do you think?